You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
Well, what's the trouble?
They're gonna kill him!
Gonna get when we get him home tonight, that's what's the trouble. And you can holler at all the policemen you want to, young man, that won't save you.
Even once turned into false alarm to keep me from giving him a shellacking. Good liquor never hurt anybody, boy. My old man used to give me enough of them when I was a kid. Hey, still in all, I never thought of calling the cops when he did.
They killed a man last night. Honest, they did.
Oh, Tommy.
I watched him through the window. I saw them kill him.
Say, are you the kid who was down the station house this morning and claimed he saw a murder?
Yeah, that was me.
What? You went and bothered them, too.
Oh, Tommy, that's the last straw. Oh, it wasn't so bad. Nobody paid any attention to him. Well, it was bad enough, and he's going to get plenty when I get him home. Don't worry, son. Maybe it won't be too bad.
They're not my mommy.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
We're talking Bob Hoskins going straight gangster mode. Join the sleaze.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for, oh my God, how long? I don't even know. A long time. I think I looked at it and we got something like 90 bonus episodes. We're getting pretty close to 100. And if you include our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release movies, we got even more than that. So patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast, if that interests you. We actually have a bonus transmission by the time you guys are listening to this going up tomorrow, where we will be talking Last Duel and Dune, which are going to be big ones for people. So if that interests you at all, that's going to be dropping tomorrow. And speaking of which, we did have a bunch of people make the jump this month. So many that I'm going to have to really rip through this. So apologies to anyone if
this
I
is my
butcher
favorite
a name
part. Let's do this.
Yeah. We have Corey Donovan and Connor McGonigal, who both upgraded from $5 to $10 this month. And will be joining us for the monthly virtual screenings we do for the $10 patrons. I think this month it's Noirvember. I think we were looking at possibly doing Detour with everyone. So awesome. If that interests you at all, that's what we're going to be doing with Connor and Corey. So thanks to those guys for joining us. We've got Alec Juvelli, Aiden Hadley, Diego Crespo, actually friend of the pod and guest of the pod. I think he signed up to hear us talk about Near Dark last month. I know that's one of his favorite films.
Nice.
Kyler McFarland. I would have just sent it to you, Diego. You could have asked. Chris Moisey, Zoid Wheeler, Nico Crever, Jonathan Gonslaves, Brandon Garcia, Cosmic Surfin, cool name, cool. Michael Burke, Drew Hunter, Martin Worrell, Wesley Eddings, Buck Bell, Wes Keaton, Poonan, Oren Lehman, James McDermott, oh my God, Lakota Crawford, Simon Ostick, who upgraded his $5 a month to an annual subscription, which is something people can do if they don't know that. So he's paid for a full year up front, thanks to Simon. Same actually with Edward. Edward upgraded from $5 a month to actually $10 a month for the year. Holy shit. Thank you, Edward.
Thank you, Edward. We're
still going, by the way. B. Watkins, Kyle Kimbrough Marmon, Sid Beretta, William Kyland Bycroft. Okay, hold on. We're still going here. Angus Shaw, Alex Madalena. I tricked you there. Malia Obama. I don't think that's true, but I appreciate you pretending for us. Martin Bernabe and Joel Halverson.
Damn.
Thanks so much. Crazy big month. Spooktober is always usually pretty big for us, but thanks. It's crazy. Thanks so much to all of you. Hope you guys enjoyed all those bonus episodes, especially the Spooktober ones. We had a lot of them. We had like 3 of them last month. So hope you guys are enjoying all of those horror movie talks, but we're moving on. That's the one plug for the week. Obviously, it's the Patreon. The other plug is, as always, is Apple Podcasts. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, scroll down to the very bottom, give us a good old rating and review down there. Helps us climb the ranks over at iTunes and find new listeners. And actually, like 10 of you decided to just review us last week, which was crazy.
Awesome.
Sometimes I
guys.
check, and you guys had some very positive things to say. So just so you know, I do read those. So thanks. It's very much appreciated. And the last plug is merch. If you guys like the poster art that local horror artist Trevor Henderson did for the podcast, we actually had him on as a guest again last month. He was a lot of fun talking about Halloween movies with. If you like the art he did for us, you can find it in a link in the description. You can put it on basically anything. A shirt, a hoodie, a notebook, a pillow, a mask, anything you can think of, you can probably put it on. So again, link in the description or sleazoidspodcast.com if that interests you at all. But holy crap, what an intro. I'm grateful, but yeah, holy crap. We are back. Welcome to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also as always is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks would have heard from us, and that's when we would have had artist for the pod, Trevor Henderson, on the show. We were talking about The Midnight Hour from 1985 and The Lady in White from 1988, two sort of children's autumn nostalgic fall kind of horror films in different ways. Midnight Hour has more of that Halloween party vibe.
Yeah.
The makeup effects work was done by the team who did Thriller. That's the kind of vibe it's going for, whereas Lady in White has more of this more Spielbergian quality to the children's aspect that gets really dark and ghostly as the sort of reveals make themselves, and it becomes a story about a child realizing that there's a child murderer in his town. And Trevor was really fun to talk about with those, and also worth noting that Frank LaLoggia, who directed Lady in White, he listened to the show and he really enjoyed it, and he had me send it to him. So Frank, thanks for listening. I think we gained a new listener.
Yeah, your movie's awesome, Frank.
Yeah, we liked it a lot. And then last week, for the bonus listeners over on the Patreon exclusively, we did your guys' patron voted episode, which I'm sure most of you know by now, but patrons, once every 2 months, we get you guys to pick the double feature and vote which one that you guys want to hear us talk about the most. And so for the Halloween episode, the horror double feature that won the poll was Phantasm, 1979, and Phenomena, 1985, Dario Argento. Once again, two sort of Italian horror stylized films with surreal sex and death violence, but experienced by leading role child characters, which kind of added a new level of perversity to those sequences, which, it's not like they weren't perverse to begin with. But it was a lot of fun talking about that, and patron Nick Ferguson was the one who nominated that, so thanks to him for picking that. But that was the big Halloween Spooktober climax. That was the end of it. And as always, when we finish up our month of horror, we gotta relax. We gotta unload.
Put those fedoras on.
Yeah, we gotta unload with a month of crime. Entering Noirvember, we have a very special guest joining us, a returning guest. He is a freelance film critic and writer and editor and historian. He's written for places like the New York Times, Vulture, Flavor Wire, Village Voice, Vice, Slate, so many places I can't even name them all. And he also, last time he was on this show, he was working on a book about New York cities and the movies that made it. And we had a lot of fun talking with him. But that book is done, and it's called Fun City Cinema. And he is here to, I think, tell us a little bit about that journey and also share with us some films he discovered while he was making that, which he was kind of doing last time he was here as well. But that guest is Jason Bailey. Jason, how you doing?
Josh, Jamie, thank you for having me back, man. I really appreciate it. It's good to kick off Noirvember with you.
Oh, yes, yeah. No, there was no one more perfect when I was looking for Noirvember guests, because I was like, he just finished a book about New York City films, and there's no place where they have filmed more crime films. Yeah. Can I imagine? And last time you were on, you brought with you Night of the Juggler and Nighthawks. So we talked about kind of like a film that was really hard to find, and then more of like one of the stranger Stallone crime films out of New York. But what have you brought with you this week? Jason?
So this week, I have a sort of decade-spanning noir and neo-noir pairing. And it's fascinating that the last 4 movies you've talked about have all sort of been films with child protagonists, because
we thought about this too.
we're just going to keep that train right on rolling.
We did not coordinate any of this. This was like, one was picked by another guest way at a different time, and the other one was voted by the patrons, who would have had no idea what the other two pairings were. So
stars
just by
are
total
aligning.
happenstance, 3 weeks of children in danger.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So the first film, the sort of older of the two, the classic noir, if you will, is The Window from 1949, directed by Ted Tatzlaff. And then the second half of the double is Perfect Strangers, also known as Blind Alley, directed by the one and only New York City sleazemeister, Mr. Larry Cohen.
Woo!
And I selected this pairing just because, you know, one of the things that I enjoyed when I was working on the book, which covers 100 years of New York City movies. Like, it starts in 1920 and goes to 2020. So
Awesome.
one of the things that I really dug was seeing films separated by decades that explored similar themes, that had similar stories even, and sometimes were even dwelling in similar neighborhoods. But of course, styles of film had changed, permissiveness of what could be on film had changed, and neighborhoods that they were shot in had changed. And so in sort of thinking about that and thinking about noir, I landed on this pairing because it's basically the same story. It's a story about a small child in New York who witnesses a murder and is then in grave danger because of that. But we see it in, again, 2 very different styles and 2 very different approaches to that material.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was so shocked that I was like, another child is gonna get messed up. But yeah, and also just 2, again, as you mentioned, like, you know, very similar premises, but there couldn't be anything further from this sort of like 1949 directed by, you know, someone who had worked as a cinematographer for Hitchcock, and
right.
you know, from a story that, you know, also by Cornell Woolrich, who, you know, did who wrote Rear Window. So like, to see that, you know, filmmakers like that take on this story, and then to see, like, you know, Sleazoid's legend of the show, Larry Cohen, you know, do his own spin on like something different. You could not get like more polar opposite stylizations. But one thing is consistent, and that is that New York looks disgusting. Which I'm excited to talk about a lot. This is the New York has garbage everywhere double feature. Yep. And I'm excited to talk about that. So let's do it. Let's jump into it. Let's start off here with The Window.
Take a hairbrush to you.
Please, Mom.
Tommy. Well, with all the stories you tell, it's no wonder you have nightmares.
Nightmares.
Yes, nightmares. You've had a bad dream. You're soaking wet. Now go on and go back to bed.
But, Mom.
And go to sleep like a good boy.
All right, we are talking about The Window, the 1949 American suspense film, noir film, directed, as Jason mentioned, by one Ted Tatzlaff, and also based on a short story called The Boy Who Cried Murder by Cornell Woolrich, who...
Great title. Why would you change that title to something as bland as The Window? Yeah.
Did you hear the other title for the short story when it was reprinted?
No.
It was called Fire Escape.
God, come on. You guys.
Yes. But for anyone who hasn't seen The Window, it is it stars Bobby Driscoll as this little boy named Tommy, who is this very imaginative young boy living in New York who frequently makes things up to a lot of the kids around him, a lot of the adults and his parents. to try to presumably to try to like heighten the experience of living in the Lower East Side surrounded by garbage and rundown condemned buildings everywhere and things. So you can tell why this kid wishes he was kind of in a Western adventure story, or or wishes why he was in some sort of crime story. But everyone knows him as the local kid who kind of makes shit up. And as a result, when he witnesses a murder, as is aptly sort of described by the title of Cornell Woolrich's story, no one believes him. His parents don't believe him. He goes to the police don't believe him. And it becomes a really scary movie, actually, just about the lack of control and autonomy that a child has in the world. Because it is just this kid straight up saying what we know to be the truth, that someone was murdered and he's in danger, and every single adult straight up dismissing him. And you understand kind of why on some level, but the sort of pain and suspense of the film a lot of the time does become, the fact that, why is this kid having so much trouble just being helped? He's screaming at the top of his lungs, someone help this child.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And like they use a lot of different things to complicate his situation. Like, for instance, when he starts, he sees the murder and he starts telling his folks about it and all of that, they instantly think that he's, full of shit because he's the liar. But then they even start kind of weighing the relationships they have with each other as like a tool to manipulate him a little bit. Like the father at one point says, like, you don't want me to be, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like, you don't want me to be embarrassed for you to be my son if everyone thinks that you're a liar and, and all of this. And it's just like a really devastating moment because this kid has nowhere else to go. He even has a line, I think, that says pretty much outright that he just has nowhere to go because he's a child. And you would hope that
you go to the adults, you go to your parents. They're the people who are supposed to, get you out of a situation like this.
And for them to not only not believe you, but then to like pretty much kind of put your relationship with them on the table as something that could be destroyed because of this quote unquote lie, is really heavy, especially for I don't know, he's like 8 or 9, 10 at the most. So yeah, it's wild. And that's just one example.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the things that it is really striking to watch just from the perspective of like a parent, which I am. I have a daughter who's about this kid's age. And it is wild to me how, I mean, a major sort of plot development hinges on the notion, which I'm sure was the case at the time, where people would just leave their little ass kid home alone all night by themselves. I was just, I cannot imagine like telling my 8-year-old, like, all right, kid, see you in the morning, lock the door, don't open it. Like, that part blew my mind. But, again, this is a time when our relationships with children and the sort of, like you said, the autonomy, or at least the way we thought about children, was very different. And movies reflected that. Like, this is a period when movies were not hesitant to put children in peril, like serious peril.
Yeah.
And there's a scene in the back where the murderers have him in the back of a cab, and he's screaming and hooting and hollering when they just fucking clock this kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a jolt. Like, it's just shocking to see in a movie, even from villains. Like, villains nowadays, you still don't see a lot of kids getting punched in the face. And they knock him out. And it was a jolt, like, sort of viscerally.
Yeah.
But then to the effect of the movie, it's also a jolt intellectually because, like, oh shit, these people are capable of anything,
Right. Yeah, because if they're willing to do that, they can't have many boundaries. That's the thing.
Exactly.
And then there's also in that scene too. I loved that sequence. They have the cop come up too, and Bobby's just screaming at the top of his lungs, just like these aren't my parents. Help me. Like, this is a problem. I'm being kidnapped here. And the guy just, he brushes it off because they play as the parents and they say like, oh, he's just a liar. He's a storyteller, basically saying what his parents have been telling him, which is kind of funny in a way too. And then when they drive off, Also, that cab driver needs to be questioned as well. But anyway, when they drive off, he just has this one line where he just goes, "They're not my parents," and it kind of it starts to distance the audio a little bit from the cop, and it really just kind of just terrified me. Like it's such a vulnerable position that he's in. He has just he can't do anything. He's 8. Like even if he wanted to try to physically overpower them, he's incapable of it. So. Yeah, that scene was terrifying, really scary.
I'd also like to shout out, one of NYPD's finest there. Jesus Christ. I wrote the line down because the dad says, "Oh, he's just hooting and hollering because we're gonna beat his ass when we get home," or whatever he says. And the cop replies, and I ran it back so I could jot this down. The cop says, and I quote, "A good licking never hurt anybody, boy. My old man used to give me enough of them when I was a kid." Okay, thanks, officer. Thank you so much for that real insight.
And then when that moment hits, that's when the perversity of the film really hit for me, and it kind of ran through in retrospect, some of the other stuff of it, because early on, it is understandable that the parents won't listen to him because the kid was a scene earlier. He was telling the dad this like grand story about how he had like killed mobsters in the street or something.
With a gun he found.
And his dad is like, okay, shut the fuck up. And so as soon as he tells them that he's seen this murder and also that he sees the murder at night and he jolts him awake from his bed and they're like, you just had a nightmare. And, so there's something understandable with the way that they aren't listening to him. But at a certain point,
he insists.
He's already in trouble. He's got nothing to benefit from keeping up the lie anymore. And they can't, they keep getting more and more frustrated with him and locking him in his room and freaking out about it. And then it really clicked for me as soon as the kidnappers started using that image to their advantage. It got really sad and scary because the fact that, again, they're punching him unconscious in the back of a cab. The cabbie can see that. The cabbie can hear that. Yeah. The way that the camera is sort of like panning around as they're playing like Happy Family to the cabbie, and then the cop and then the patrolman, sort of like comes up and it's those things where like, for some reason this kid's words don't mean as much as those people because they perform the right domestic look, that they look like they could be parents. Yeah. And because of that, you can literally ignore the spine shivering screams of little Bobby Driscoll. And you're like, there's something wrong with this fucking kid. Even if those were his parents, those parents are going to murder him. He's fucking terrified.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. Like even if they were, you need to rip them from their arms because they are unsuited to be parents. And also I found it so like almost darkly humorous, but it might even be the scene after that same cop talks to the father that realizes that Bobby isn't in the room anymore, and he's like, "Hey, my son's missing. Have you seen him?" And nothing in the cop's head clicks that he just witnessed a kid screaming, "These aren't my parents, help me." Yeah. And he's just like, "Oh, we'll find him. Don't worry about it. He's probably just some stupid missing kid that ran away." And it's like, it's just scene after scene with just absolutely dumbass adults.
And that line that the cop gets to when the father comes up to him is, "Kids do funny things."
Right. Kids are kids.
Yeah. The cops don't come off looking well through much of the movie. In fact, I do love how the one cop that comes to investigate the tip does like a completely illegal search, like completely lies about who he is or what he's doing there. Yeah. It's like, I don't think this is by the book, officer.
I also love the little, like, they do all these subtle little twists throughout it that keep you on your toes because, the story itself is pretty simplistic, but there's two moments, there's more, but there's two specific moments I'm thinking of. One is where the father actually comes home when Bobby decides he's going to run away and so that he can, like, I think it's so that he can gather more proof or something, but he packs his bags and he writes them a little note or whatever. And then somebody comes through the doorway and it's just completely shadowed. and you're like, oh my God, the neighbor's here. And then the light comes on and it's just the dad. And he gives and what it is, it's like a sense of relief, but then they instantly turn that into more kind of nail biting situation, because then he locks the kid in the fucking room.
Yeah.
So he can't go anywhere. So it's this like constant just back and forth, like relief and then tension, relief and tension.
Yeah, it very much captures this idea of like your safety and existence relies entirely on other people.
Right. Yes.
You have no sense of, that you can just decide to do something, or that, you can say something and people will take it at face value. So this idea that, this kid is like, has this very natural instinct to be, there's killers upstairs, I'm home alone, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
That very natural instinct is like, turned against him because, that he just looks like a kid who's misbehaving and who's running away from home. And, the home is supposed to be this safe place. Why would he go out into the dirty streets?
Yeah, it must be the kid's fault.
That doesn't make sense.
And they do that thing where he leaves
in this
the note.
specific context, it makes perfect sense.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And they do that thing where he leaves the note where he goes, P.S., by the way, what I've said about the neighbors is completely true. And so when they have the neighbor come in, and before he even messes with Bobby, he sees the note and rips only that part of it off so that it looks like he just ran away, which is just another great kind of tension-filled moment.
Nice moment, yeah.
And then the other one I was going to talk about was just when what you guys were saying. It was when he comes, the officer comes in to do the inspection as like as an estimator of some kind, and they have kind of a cool moment where you think, oh shit, that he might actually investigate these people because he sees a stain on the floor, and then you're like, awesome. There's no way that they'd have like actual leak marks on the ceiling to signify that it's a leak, right? No, they do. And so you're just kind of like, another snap. You're like, shit, they can't get him this time.
That moment made me laugh so hard because that is literally killers being able to get away with bloodstains on their floor because their apartment is shitty.
Yes, yeah.
It's
Welcome
such a
to the
funny,
Lower East Side, everybody.
That's what it literally. I was like, dude, if they did that in any other, if they upgraded their apartment one level, they would not have gotten away with that murder as easily as they did.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Also,
I did
Go ahead.
want to mention just a little bit of context. One of the reasons I liked this movie so much and responded to it so much when I was writing the book, when I was doing the research, was because this was a rare sort of New York movie of the period that was actually shot entirely in New York.
I read that.
Oh, that's
cool.
cool.
The real Lower East Side. That's all the studio stuff was done on the Pathé Studios on the Upper East Side. It was made after the shooting, but before the release of The Naked City, which is one of the books, one of the movies we really get into in the book, because that was sort of one of its gimmicks when it came out, was that it was the first motion picture in 30, 40 years that had been shot, major motion picture shot entirely in New York City. But a lot of these, sort of B-movie noirs, because they were working on lower budgets and because, they had these directors who had been sort of inspired by Italian neorealism and stuff like that, they really went to the extra effort to try to at least shoot parts of their New York movies in New York, which is why you've got a lot of great, New York location photography in like Kiss of Death and Force of Evil and The Dark Corner and movies like that. As opposed to like a pricier movie, like the sort of A-movie version of this, which would be the aforementioned Rear Window from a few years later, which is a terrific movie, but shot entirely on a soundstage in Los Angeles.
Right.
Titch did not try to find that location in New York City. So I think that, it becomes a cliche when you talk about it, or at least as much as I have. But that sense of atmosphere, that sense of authenticity that you get from those scenes where the kids are really playing out on the streets of New York, and it's clearly the actual streets of New York and not some shitty backlot version of a New York City block.
Yeah.
I think really does sort of, it gives the movie an authenticity and sort of grounds it in a realism that matters when you're trying to build this kind of suspense in a story like this.
Yeah, no, I agree. I loved the opening kind of montage of just like the kid playing in like the rundown building, and like at first you're kind of wondering what kind of movie that you're in, because like you know, you're seeing these Lower East Side boarded up buildings, there's trash everywhere, the cars and people running every which way, and you find Tommy kind of like asleep in this like, you know, this condemned apartment building, holding on to a gun, and just the image of a 10-year-old gun. 10-year-old with a gun is just a great image in general. But then, you know, it turns out that he's a toy gun and he's shooting the other kids and he's just playing. But, you know, they're using this rundown building as like a jungle gym, and he's he's running on the rooftops and the fire escape ladders, and you know, he's gambling with the other kids to get their money and stuff like that. And there's something so interesting about that, like the reason he is able to kind of survive this situation, and the reason he even observes this murder in the first place, is because, you know, he's pretty comfortable on the streets. In the kind of underbelly and underworld that these criminals might be hanging out in. And I love that they eventually applied that into the climax of the film, where he actually like bests them in a who can survive a condemned building, because the kid, he knows it, you know, it's the kind of thing that he sees all around him. And, you know, there's an interesting combination of, you know, the way that they shoot it is for, you know, it's a crumbling brick and rusty ladders, and they want to show it to you that it's kind of dirty and it's claustrophobic in a way, but you know, it also makes sense of, you know, the reason that this kid has the imagination that he has in the first place. And you watch this kid playing on this rooftop, and you're like, yeah, I mean, this kid he really wants to be a cowboy. And he makes up a lie to all of his friends about how his dad actually bought a ranch, and he's going to use the money he won from them to go buy a horse. And go in a dated line, go kill a bunch of indigenous folks off the ranch before he goes and takes it.
Yes.
You know, that's a kid thing. Like, whatever kind of childhood you have, you want to live somewhere else. You know, if you know, if you grow up on a ranch, then all you want to do is move to a big city. But if like you live in a big city, all you want is to be a cowboy.
Well, and then I love too that, like, you know, like there's some really tense moments in here, and you know, obviously Tetzlaff, who, you know, was a cinematographer for a very long time and shot thrillers, and he shot it was Notorious that he did, right, for Hitchcock. I think that was the one that he did, which is a beautiful movie, of course. You can tell that he brings a little bit of that sense of style to it. But one thing that I really loved was how when the kid is, you know, he can't sleep because he's not comfortable in his own bed. He's more comfortable in the fire escape. That's a New Yorker right there.
Yes, it is.
And how flat the actual like death sequences. There's no like music or anything. There's nothing to it. He literally just looks inside of a window. You get this really nice sort of like shadowy image of like the light just barely touching his eyes while he looks in. You just see a body fall with blood, and you see some scissors hit the floor, and he realizes very bluntly that, oh my God, like seeing a murder is, you know, not as, cinematic or as exciting as I imagined. It's actually just like kind of gross. And immediately runs inside and is shouting at his parents and everything like that. And I thought that there was something really interesting in the way that it applies both the location work to this kid's like psychology, and how that psychology would have developed out of the place that he was in. It makes a huge difference when you actually see these surroundings that he's in to get that.
I like the way that they shoot his perspective, at least throughout most of the film, because they do have a lot of like the camera at a lower angle, almost at Bobby's height, like almost so that you kind of just get his
There's a shot where the mother's doing laundry, and you just see like her legs, and it's like framed low because, like, you know, she's talking to him. It should be like a reverse shot of equals, but like literally you just see like her legs. And the same thing happens when it's revealed that it is his dad, not the neighbor, that comes through the darkness. But at first it's like, even when he turns on the lights, the camera is lower, and you see him pretty much take up the whole screen, and Bobby's only taking up half. And I liked those moments. Those were really cool. Really good way of showing that perspective.
Very good point. Yeah, and that's something that even like that Spielberg did in E.T., you know, like there's a lot of that same sort of lower photography to put you in that kid's perspective. One other thing that I wanted to mention when you talked about, you know, him looking through the titular window, if you will, to see the murder, like that was actually something that was happening, that there are a lot of movies of this period where we're seeing murders through windows. Like the opening murder in The Naked City is through, we view it, you know, the camera through an open window. The assault that's witnessed by the protagonist in Killer's Kiss is kind of through an open window. And I think that sort of becomes one of the sort of tropes of the urban thriller, because in New York, everyone is just packed into this tight, confined space. Like everyone's just sort of on top of each other. And
like peeking inside someone else's life kind of thing.
Absolutely. At their sort of maybe not best moments, you know?
Yeah.
And then especially with stories like these that are set in the summertime, you know, and the first time I saw it, you know, obviously I'd seen Rear Window first, even though it came out later. And Rear Window is one of my favorite movies. And I was struck not only by the similarity in story, but to the fact that like the first time I'd ever seen people sleeping on a fire escape was in Rear Window. There's that couple that sleeps out there too. And I'm just like, oh, that must be like, you know, a New York City pre-air conditioning just sort of thing that you did to try to cool off.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting to compare it to Rear Window because obviously it's, you know, it's written by the same writer. And there's something about how in Rear Window you kind of get swept up once again in the psychology of Jimmy Stewart's character as he's, you know, actually watching, and he's kind of thrilled by the watching in a way. And this I found interesting as a kind of reversal, or because it's partially a test run where like the kid is, you know, he's intrigued by the outside world around him, which we already mentioned, which is something that, you know, which is what gets him in trouble in being able to see this stuff in the first place. But there is a twist on it in the sense that, you know, Jimmy Stewart finds it engaging and the mystery engaging for a lot longer because of the safety of kind of like the distance that he has, and the way that the camera is kind of held at a distance for a lot of this. There's something really threatening about the lack of safety and distance that he has here. Like the murderers, he knows, he goes out his window, he goes up a ladder, and they're right there, and that like terrifies him, you know, completely, and he can't get anyone to understand that or believe him in any way. Because even in Rear Window, you know, he's trying to convince other people of what he's seen as well, and they won't. But there's something more existentially terrifying just being from a kid's perspective, and you know that this kid, no matter how hard he tries, and you know, credit to the child performer Bobby Driscoll, like, you know, there's some really horrifyingly sad lines that he gets to deliver where he talks to the dad and he's like, you know, if you see a thing with your own eyes, it can't be a dream, right? Or something like that. Yeah. And because his parents are being like, you had a nightmare. You know, I've had dreams, you know, where the place was on fire and I woke up and I had to get someone to convince me I wasn't on fire, but I wasn't. And he's just like, and you know, they keep pressuring him to not tell this story. And yeah, it's really disheartening for this child, and it's really painful. And like, at least, like, say what you will, it's like at least Stewart had Grace Kelly as support. You know what I mean? This kid's got nobody. There's not, he couldn't have the little like 9-year-old girl neighbor come over and be like, we're going to solve the mystery together. He's just on his own. He's just completely on his own. This poor little guy. No, and that sense, you know, that sort of sympathy for him, you're right, is in a lot of the line readings, but also in the physicality of the thing. The way he flinches when the lady upstairs tries to muss his hair at that one point when she's like, she's making nice, and he like absolutely jerks away from her. It's really, it's a hell of a moment from that.
And then the mother sees that as something disrespectful when he's just scared of a murderer. So so she's all like, wow, you've just absolutely embarrassed me, and you're not going to eat dinner or lunch until you apologize. So basically, they basically starve him as discipline, which is an interesting tactic. I guess an old school tactic.
That one again, that one has fallen away as well. Yes,
luckily. But yeah, just the complications with that too. Like, of course he'd be, you know, taken aback by a murderer trying to touch him 6 hours after he saw the murder, but because of the, you know, the politics of the society and just the relationship, the mother and son relationship to the neighbor. The mom sees it as something bad. So I loved all those complications too. Really smart.
And they have to maintain some sort of, some sense of, again, this sort of image of domesticity a little bit as well, where like,
Right.
the kid was trying to get the police involved, and that's that's something that the mother feels really bad about, and immediately takes him upstairs to apologize.
Right.
And yeah, that it really is a horrifying moment.
And he's screaming at her like, they're gonna kill me because they'll know that I said something, and we know that that's true.
Yeah,
so we're like,
you just ratted on me, Mom, and now they're gonna kill me.
You
and
snitch.
Then
Snitches get stitches, Ma.
cut to him in his bed, and he can hear the footsteps of the murderers upstairs, like pacing.
That transition was so good.
Yeah. There are some really nice little little formal touches like that, like the huge tilt from his bed to the ceiling where you can hear the footsteps and everything like that. There's also a great sequence where he's trapped in the room and the killers are trying to break in, and there's a part where he is trying to evade her using a flashlight as like a spotlight, and he's doing like little moves and rolls through his room trying to hide in the shadows and stuff like that.
Yeah. There's a really good, it's almost, it's got a darkness and kind of a scariness to it, but it's played almost comedically in a way where it's when they get to the abandoned building, and, it's kind of the chase sequence between the murderers and Bobby. And at one point, he gets to this like upper floor and finds a closet to hide in. And he gets in the closet, closes the door. And when he's hiding, the male neighbor comes by and starts to try to get in. And Bobby turns around and sees the dead body that they kept there from the scene before. And he's so terrified that he screams at the top of his lungs and hits the door open, which causes the guy to actually get backed up. And so he can escape. And it's funny because he's seen a dead body, and that's horrifying for a child. But then it also plays like it's his motivation to get the hell out of there and escape from them. So I thought that was both funny and a good way of bringing back kind of the body and putting it in front of him to really have a very adult moment.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of really great little little scary details like that are done with the camera work. One of my favorites was the great shot of him realizing that he's going to be completely home alone. His dad's going to work that night. His mother's taking the bus, and it's done in this great shot where he is looking out his window and he sees the parents getting on the bus from a distance, and he's slowly starting to like feel things are sort of encroaching around him, and that the murderers are going to come and get him any second. And what does the camera do at that exact moment? It pans up to the murderers looking out their window, also watching the parents leave.
Yeah. Oh, so good. I also really liked they have to, obviously because he's like 8 or 9, they make him pretty naive in certain scenes. And one of the great moments is when he initially goes to the police station and he's just telling them about the story, and he's doing it with like excitement and concern, and the cop that's on the other side of the table responding to him is just mocking him, like completely just sarcastically responding to him. And Bobby doesn't see that because he's 8 and can't read it. Yeah. So he keeps like just engaging and telling the story as if the cop is really listening to him. And there's, there is a bit of a comedic beat to that, of course, but there's also just another sense of desperation that you feel, because it's just like, Bobby, you don't even get that they're not listening to you because you're a child. And it's just, it's very frustrating, and it's great.
I can tell you from experience that 8-year-olds don't get sarcasm. They just, I keep trying and trying. This kid's going to pick it up one day. I don't know.
No, there's a lot of really great stuff with Bobby. Even before he goes into the actual detective's office and he just goes into the police station up front, he literally can't even like see over the desk at the guy to the front thing. Yes. I thought that was so funny. And the guy was like, "Why is this kid talking? Like I see little hands and eyes."
Yeah. He also tells him the whole story, and then the secretary dude's just like, "Yeah, kid, you want the detectives over there. I can't do like anything for you."
Yeah, and I don't know much about Bobby Driscoll because the only other thing I've seen him in was Peter Pan. But from what I understand, he was already with he was like a Disney star before this.
Yeah,
right? He was
there's
in
like
Song of the South.
There's like a big credit, like a big ornate special thanks to Walt Disney Studios for lending
Bobby. Us his child.
Yes. It felt a little oogie. Yes, honestly. But yeah, apparently so. I mean, he was a contract player over there and got loaned out for this. And I'm sure a handsome profit to Mr. Disney, because that was how those deals tended to work.
Yeah. He also had a tragic end. Apparently, I looked him up after because I saw that he did Peter Pan and that he actually was the voice of Peter Pan, and I grew up watching that, so I was just like, oh, that's cool. I've actually seen him do something before. And then I just went to his Wikipedia, and apparently he passed away when he was 30 years old, and they found him in an abandoned warehouse, like with alcohol around him and like religious pamphlets and stuff. And and apparently it's been, I think, rectified now, but he was buried in like an unmarked grave, and just really, really sad stuff.
Yeah, because originally they found him and couldn't identify him.
Right. He didn't have any ID on him. That's right. So
yeah, even though they were looking at like a very famous child star who was just, like 30 now.
Which probably says something about his condition, unfortunately. But yeah, that was unfortunate to read, especially after such a watching this film, because I really loved this movie. So yeah, that sad ending, unfortunately, to Bobby.
Mm-hmm. But no, he gives a really good performance in this. I mean, it's kind of a hard thing to base, like a movie like this like hinges on his performance working.
Oh, totally.
Yes, 100%. He's in every single scene. He's the entire anchor to this thing.
Yeah, so you have to buy both kind of like the innocence and also the regret about the lying too.
Yeah,
I'm never gonna tell a fucking story ever again kind of aspect of this. Like, I can't believe what the hell I'm going through just because like I had dreams and made stuff up sometimes. But he's also very the way that they depict him too. He's very resourceful, which I like as well. Again, it's a lot of like kind of the logistics of how a kid could get out of a scenario like this. And I like when they, have him doing things like turning the hanger into a lock pick and
you really
like that.
Yeah, you pinpoint it. It's that idea of the urban playground at the beginning. Like that's why that sequence is so important to set that up. The idea that, if this were a suburban kid, then he would know all of the alleys and shortcuts through the neighborhood. And just instead, he knows where they are in like the abandoned buildings and places like that. It's you get to know the environment, and that sequence I think is really key to set that up so that we buy all that stuff later. So he doesn't just suddenly seem like a little MacGyver or something.
I also like that it still turns it into a tension-filled moment, because at first you're like, okay, he's gonna get the key, he's gonna get out of there, the girl's looking at him through the window, and then the male neighbor steps up and he actually puts the key inside the hanger so that Bobby can unlock the door and scare the shit out of him. And it's like just another thing I guess I was talking about previously, where it's just that like tension relief, and it does it throughout the entire hour and a half. Or I guess I don't know how long was this actually? Like 80 minutes?
I think it's not even.
It's like 70 minutes.
73, I think,
or
something like that. Yeah, nice
even,
tight B movie.
yes.
Yeah. Always appreciate that.
And also, speaking of...
I like the scene you were talking about too, Jamie, where he hands him the key, and and it's this very scary moment where like the kid is only getting through the door because the bad guy is helping him get through the door.
Yeah.
But I love that when he gets through and he kind of hides in the corner, and then the kid sees him and he like freezes, and there's this great push in on him as he realizes that it's not his dad this time. It's actually is the Mr. Kellerson, and I love that actor immediately pulls like a very charming, like, I'm an adult, let's talk, I have power in this situation, and you know what, let's just straighten things out.
We don't need to hurt you.
Yeah, we'll just go to the police station, and I'll turn myself in, and we'll talk it through, and we'll get your stuff. Like the guy knows perfectly how to convince this kid that he is not going to take him into an alley and try to murder him, which is what he actually tries to do when literally the first shadowy alley that they walk past. He's like, this is good enough. Just throws him in. You get like garbage flying in the foreground. Yeah.
And I also love that it once again fills it up with tension by doing it all off screen. Like they rush him into the alleyway, and then he kind of goes off camera, and you hear a scuffle and a couple screams and stuff, and then Bobby gets loose and runs off into the opposite end of the camera. And so I thought that was really cool, and that's what I guess triggers that chase sequence on the rooftop and the abandoned building and all of that. But yeah, that's great. It was very funny that he has no patience. He's like in the middle of the street. There are actually people walking on the sidewalk and shit. And he's just like, oh, well, here's the first alleyway. Let's kill this kid.
Yeah. Here we go.
Yeah. Well, because then actually that's the part where they end up recapturing him and taking him into the cab, because they say we can't take him to the police station. We didn't kill him. Well, so we do the cab sequence that we were talking about, where the killers pretend to be his parents, and because they have enough of a look that they could be his mother and father, the cop believes them, the cabbie believes them. They get all the way back to the apartment, and one of my favorite things is that the killers are, I guess maybe not the most smart. They probably could have just killed him right away, but they're smart enough to be like, if we want to kill a kid, more people are probably going to look into that than for this guy that we killed upstairs. So let's, we got to make this look like an accident. You said that he hung out on the fire escapes and that he's kind of precocious and he's imaginative and he likes to play around. What if I just put him unconscious, sitting on top of a fire escape? And that is like a really horrifying moment. Yeah,
that scene is scary as shit.
Yeah,
the kid is like half asleep. He's drifting and swaying back and forth on the fire escape. And yeah, you're like, okay, this kid, if the wind blows one way, he's falling down and dying then and there. And they're going to be like, oh, he was climbing the fire escape. It was all an accident. Sorry. Yeah, that moment really, really scary. Probably the most scary, like actual, like sort of child in peril kind of sequence that actually takes place, which then leads into the good old Hitchcock roof chase, baby, where he wakes up and climbs up the ladder, and it becomes a whole rooftop turned into a rundown building. And there's a really great sequencing in like the way that they follow each other from room to room, and every door frame is like pitch black, and you don't know what it is you're going into. You don't find out till the shot is actually in the next room. You're like, where am I right now?
Yeah, it's a very disorienting sequence, but in a great way. It feels very maze-like, like you just cannot find your way through those abandoned buildings.
No, well, and the confidence with which obviously the kid runs through it, because it's his playground. He knows it so well, and the killers don't.
Definitely,
like that's what gives him kind of like the advantage in that sequence. And also the kid like screaming for his dad while he's in the building, as the dad is getting in the cop car and running away, and he's losing his chance. And
then speaking of just horrible cop work. When he's on the beam. So what happens is they get to this like high beam place, and Bobby crawls across it, and then the one guy tries to, but the beam gets loose, and I can't remember, is it Bobby that loosens it, or is it just gets loose and he falls? I can't recall.
He does slide a piece of wood or something, so I have a feeling that he partially pushes it off.
Okay. And then so now Bobby is just stuck on this high beam and has nowhere to go. And the cops all come in to save him, because this is kind of like his last moment in peril. And all they have is this net. And this looks like a very high distance, by the way. Like the height is insane. And you think like, okay, well, maybe this is the only equipment that they had at the time or whatever. But there's even a line of dialogue where the cops say, we don't have time to get a ladder. So just jump, kid, or something like that. And you're like, are you fucking kidding me? Like after you watch this kid get kidnapped, like you can't also maybe put forth a little more effort and get a fucking ladder. Like it was the funniest shit in the world. But he's okay. He does do the jump, and I was a little nervous, honestly. I'm like, are they going to make the cops out to like break the kid's arm or something? They're that incompetent. But luckily he gets through, and it's a happy ending. But yeah, that last moment with the cops made me laugh so hard, and just, oh my God,
Yeah, because I think that they are supposed to be thinking that the building is in immediate collapse because of like that bit where the killer is like running on the stairs and they literally like crumble underneath his feet. So they think the building is going to fall down and they don't have time. But the funny thing is they, like that building has been up for however long it's already been up for. Who fucking knows? And like, I don't even know that they saw the stairs collapse or anything like that. Like this kid is just clearly, he's in trouble. And they're like, yeah, we got this tiny little like trampoline. Why don't you just see if you can make it?
There's a ladder somewhere, but we can't be bothered. Just jump onto this. Here's what we got. We got a towel down here. We're going to stretch this towel out and just jump in the middle of the towel, kid.
I just love that they easily could have... Go ahead, Josh.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I just love that they threw that dialogue piece in there, that it's like they could have just had the net and I would have accepted the net. I would have been like, it's the 50s, whatever, it's the net. But they had to throw in the dialogue that it's like, we don't have time, kid, jump.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, well, and I was gonna say too that the I love the dramatics of that, where like obviously it's a scary thing that he has to do. He has to jump from this high beam in this condemned building onto this tiny little trampoline. But there's also the kind of like more psychologically perverse quality of it, which is that how is this kid supposed to trust any adult ever again?
Oh yeah,
totally,
for sure.
Yeah. And so like that was part of what I read into the hesitancy that he was having too. It's like I went to you guys already. I'm in this situation because all of you.
Yeah, you know what? I'll find my own way down. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I also think,
but then you get the clean little wrap up in the car, right? Where he's like, I promise that I'll never tell another story, and I promise that I'll believe you every single time. And the dad also, despite weaponizing it previously in the film, he is proud of him.
Yeah, and I did like that. The one thing I mean, I think it's just wrapping up kind of the whole theme of it. But the kid was really good at telling stories. And it's like I don't want him to necessarily just stop. He just needs to stop lying to everybody. Yeah. I know that's not really like the point of the movie at all. But I would have liked maybe a little bit of like he channels that energy into something rather than just the dad's like, you're just not going to tell stories anymore, and I'll love you.
Yeah. No, look, they're heading into the 1950s. We have to smother imagination.
Yes.
Get to work being good little capitalists. We have no room for any of this other stuff.
But Daddy loves you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great though. I really did like the ending, and it is still very, very sweet. It's just obviously old school, but it kind of that has its charms. So. Yep. Yeah, I loved this movie personally.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Yeah,
I liked it a lot too.
I got to the first time I ever saw it was at a New York Noir festival at Film Forum in like 2007, 2008. So I got to see it projected on like a double bill with another one of the noirs that I mentioned earlier. And it plays to a crowd. Everybody was really into it. So awesome. It's a lot of fun. And there's a beautiful, I should mention this, for anybody who wants to check it out. There's a beautiful new Warner Archive Blu-ray that just came out like a month and a half ago.
Ooh.
Amazing timing.
So yeah, pick that up and check it out because it's a really just a crackerjack little thriller.
Yeah, I'm surprised that it's not a bigger than it is. I mean, do you know how it did when it initially came out?
It was actually a box office success.
Oh,
it
great.
was a big one for
RKO
Pictures. I remember looking that up because I read something about that it was right when Howard Hughes bought RKO, and apparently he thought that the film would bomb and that Bobby wasn't a good actor, so he didn't want to release it. It was actually shot in like 47 or something.
What a dumbass.
So it didn't. So it didn't get released until 49, and needless to say, Hughes was like dead wrong. Not only was it a huge box office success that played really well with audiences, Bobby got a little miniature Oscar because they didn't let kids be nominated for the Oscars at the time. But they credited him because they thought that it was a really terrific performance and people really loved the film.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well deserved.
That unerring cinematic instinct that kept The Outlaw in production for 6 years or whatever.
Yes.
Jesus Christ, Hughes.
Howard Hughes. I need that deleted scene in The Aviator of Howard Hughes being like, that window movie is not gonna be good. I I refuse to release it.
Yeah.
But yeah, pivoting towards reductive rating round for the window, which obviously Jason's already been on. He knows, I'm sure. It's the part we remove all the words, all the nuance, and reduce the film between 1 and 5. But it's also closing statements or any lines or scenes we didn't happen to hit. Although with a movie this short, I think we did a pretty good job on most of this. But anything that we wanted to hit up before we were done, for me, this is a really solid 4. It's a very dark and tense little kind of a child endangerment noir, which is a genre that I feel like I should check out a little bit more, because it's kind of rare, but it's very tense when you do see a movie that does something like this. One that came out, funny enough, this has nothing to do with anything. One I go back to every Halloween. I think of it because we just passed Spooktober. But Jaume Colette Serra's Orphan is a film that I go back to over and over again, like almost every October.
I watched that
partially
this month
because there's so much like very suspenseful little child in peril sequences in that are like the kind of thing that people don't think to put in movies anymore. But like that one is really effective. And in this, I was glad to see that someone in 1949 was coming up with this. And again, the Tetzlaff realizes it with like just the perfect sense of like low angle, sort of shadowy danger and suspenseful dramatic irony of the film. And, we spend this whole time knowing that this boy is telling the truth, but also that truth is really horrible and it shatters, his entire community and family's image of kind of normalcy that they have, which then you see the killers weaponize by pretending that they're a normal couple and family. But yeah, after a while, you really are just watching every adult in this community like resist and dismiss his like literal screams and cries in order to maintain, some sense that something like this couldn't possibly happen in the community. And it is really effectively anxiety inducing, and it's stylized right with the a lot of the shadows and a lot of the windows used as kind of like stark line dividers in some of the imagery, and the claustrophobic trap quality that some of it has as well. Yeah, I think it has a really effective sense of danger and not quite paranoia, but this very, very suspenseful dramatic irony, which I really like to see in a film. Sometimes, that ambiguity and that mystery is a nice quality, but sometimes you do really like to just, the answers up front and you watch not a single person believe that that's what is happening, and it weaponizes the audience's knowledge. It's such a frustrating experience, but really, really well handled here. So solid 4 for me.
Yeah, I'd honestly, like, it's a high 4 for me. It might even get the old Jamie TM on it, because there's something about, like, it's the 70 minutes I always love. That's just nice. It also just, it's lean. The simplicity of the story is great. I love the focus on just Bobby the entire time. Yep. And I love the way that they film his perspective. Like we were talking about the low angles. I love the way that they kind of express the relationships between adults and children, and kind of, how far a child would have to go in order to prove something in this system that we have set up, especially given the kind of familiar circumstance that he's under, because the dad does have a lot to handle. He's the working man. The mother has to do things throughout the day. So I can understand kind of their resistance at first, right? It's just, it gets very frustrating as every single adult does that to Bobby throughout, like especially the cops and all of that. But they do it in a really great way, in ways that are terrifying, ways that are funny, ways that are frustrating, but in a very exciting and entertaining way. I really, really love this, and Bobby Driscoll is unbelievable in this. He carries the entire film. And he's literally like 8 years old in this, so it's one of the best child performances I've ever seen, and I just was really wrapped up in it the entire time. I thought it was very exciting, and I just love how lean and simple the story is, and how well directed it is and acted. It's really, really, really good. Highly recommend.
Yeah,
hell yeah, for you, Jason.
Rock solid 4. I think it's one of the best of the New York City noirs, but it's not one that you often hear mentioned with the same kind of reverences like Kiss of Death or Force of Evil or some of those films. But it's a taut, effective story. It's, like you said, it's lean and mean. And I also, my affection for it, also some of it is just personal. Like, I can't tell you what a joy it was after watching all of these New York movies of the 30s and 40s that had, like a scene that was shot actually in New York and everything else was on the back lot of the soundstage. After like combing through all of these movies, just like peering and being like, is that really in the city? To have a movie that is so present in its place the way that this one is. And it's such a vivid snapshot of the Lower East Side and of those tenement buildings and of that period and of that place. It's just so evocative that I really adored it on those grounds. And then on top of that, it's a terrific story, well acted, well executed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, the location work is huge. I will say that was something I didn't mention, but like in my section, but like I'm used to seeing that kind of location work.
Absolutely.
In like the 70s and 80s.
Yep.
I don't know, but seeing it in 49 was really truly incredible and worth seeing alone, regardless of the rest of the film.
One shot specifically was when he goes down the fire escape and he just lands on the ground where like the alleyway is, and you just see like the trash, and he just runs towards. I think it's when he goes to the police station for the first time and escapes his room.
Yep. Yeah, and he's like running around like a real stray cat outside too and everything. Yeah,
it's great. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely check out The Window 1949. But I think that wraps it up here. We are going to move on here, and we're going to talk about a Larry Cohen 80s update on a very similar premise with Perfect Strangers. All right, we are back, and we are talking Perfect Strangers, the 1984. It's listed here as erotic thriller, which I guess is like partially
kind of true. I don't know.
There's a little eroticism to it, more than The Window, I'll say.
Yeah, luckily.
But yeah, not exactly how I would describe it. It's definitely more of the, kind of suspense, kind of noir, quasi neo-noir, but definitely more of a thriller, I guess. This is updated for the 80s thriller. It's kind of like a noir premise that has been updated for more of like the thriller 80s. And obviously it's directed by Larry Cohen, which is, for us, we've talked about Larry Cohen, I think, like 3 or 4 times. He's a New York low-budget guerrilla filmmaker king who started out as kind of like a TV writer, coming up with sort of ideas and log lines for episodes of all kinds of shows that you've definitely seen, including like detective shows like Columbo and stuff like that. And he was very well known for being able to pitch people on premises and things like basically on the spot. Very voracious writer. Eventually went on to try his hand at directing, and we talked about his blaxploitation update on like old 30s and 40s gangster movies with Black Caesar, which is like a very deceptively bleak and complex character movie. And then his eventual transition we also covered in the 70s into more like grindhouse fare with like his domestic family drama meets like monster movie It's Alive, or even sci-fi serial killer movie God Told Me To.
Yeah.
And these are just the ones that we've talked about, but he did like It's Alive sequels that are a lot of fun, like especially the third one, which is basically like his version of The Lost World, but like instead of dinosaurs, the island was filled with buff mutant babies.
Awesome.
Something we haven't talked about either that I've been meaning to, Q the Winged Serpent, which is a movie about like David Carradine trying to stop like a Neo-Aztec summoning of a dragon, and he like climbs the Chrysler building with like a machine gun to try and stop it and stuff like that. It's crazy. All of that is to say that Larry Cohen's basic.
I just wanted to throw in one of the other sort of like that I contemplated when we were initially saying maybe October. One of the other great sort of cross-decade New York double features that I would highly recommend is the original 1933 King Kong with Q the Winged Serpent. That is like a bang up.
Oh, that's
all
awesome.
Killer.
You might have just came up with a double feature for us, Jason.
Yeah.
We'll credit you.
Yeah,
there you go.
Definitely.
There you go.
But I guess all of that is to say that Larry Cohen is, he's a Sleazoids legend. We've always found interesting ways to use his budgetary limitations.
Oh, yeah.
And never backed down from a trashy concept if he saw a way to turn it into a genre-bending New York procedural of some kind that he could sneak some sort of commentary into as well a lot of the time. And I'm glad Jason's given us another chance to talk about him today here, where he is going to tackle the same premise as The Window. And it was cool also, again, that The Window had so much location shooting, because it's something that obviously Larry Cohen is so well known for with his guerrilla style. We talked about it every time we've talked about him. It's so incredible, the way that he will just film a set piece on a real New York street, and he'll be like, yeah, I had a couple of dollars for, the camera, and the rest of the budget was just on the free streets of New York, baby.
And there's just such an authenticity to it. Like, there's several scenes in this movie where people are like, one specifically where a couple is arguing in the middle of the street, and you can tell that a bunch of New Yorkers just started surrounding them and just kind of like being a part of the scene. And then the other moments are like when there's some detective work, like tailing some person, and he films it from very far away. So they're actually weaving in and out of actual New Yorkers, which is, I just love all that. It creates such an authentic feeling to the environment.
Yeah, I guarantee you, like, all of those gawkers in that street scene were absolutely certain they were watching a real domestic dispute. Like, we're watching a real married couple
100%.
Screaming at each other while clutching a child, and like, oh, some shit's about to go down here. What the fuck?
Another day in New York.
Yeah. No, there. If you haven't seen it, there's a wonderful. I'm sure you guys have. There's a wonderful documentary about Larry Cohen called King Cohen that came out a few years ago.
Yeah, it's awesome. Everyone should watch it.
It's great, and he gets into a lot of those other sort of stolen location things, like when he's, like he stole like the car chase climax of Black Caesar was stolen. The parade stuff and God Told Me To. He had no permits.
Yeah, we mentioned the parade stuff when we covered the film, which is crazy. Every time I watch it, I'm like, how did he steal that? He's in the middle of a fucking like cop parade, and they just I guess they just assumed he had permission to shoot it because he was being so confident about it.
I remember thinking before I knew like Cohen's like what he would do in his filmmaking techniques. I remember watching that parade scene and going, how the hell did he get like all these extras to put like to do this? This is really impressive. And then now I know, but like I remember feeling that way when I was watching it initially. So it's very cool.
Yeah. One of my personal favorites is in the Black Caesar sequel, which isn't particularly great. It's not as good as the original film, but that fight that takes place in the airport luggage.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Where like literally Fred Williamson is fighting a goon, and they're, people are really there at the airport just trying to pick up their luggage like off the conveyor belt. And Fred Williamson is literally like jumping onto people's luggage and throwing it at the bad guy, having a fist fight. And all the people are bewildered. Yes. They're like, what is going, we're just watching a real fight between these two. It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, no. And what I love about the stolen stuff in Black Caesar and Hell Up in Harlem is those are ostensibly supposed to be period pieces. They're supposed to be like taking place in the 60s, but like clear, like, none of the cars and none of the costumes on the unpaid extra, like none of it's period. It's all like 70s, but it's okay. It's the 60s, whatever, Larry Cohen. Yeah. Fun stuff.
It's great. I love it.
Yeah. But what's interesting with this is that Larry Cohen doesn't take any time at all to set this one up. He's like in it right from the opening scene, which is typical of Larry Cohen, which is, he opens on this very jazzy score of a bunch of bridge graffiti and rundown alleyways and like sewer steam. He loves that kind of atmosphere that you get from that. And you see these silhouettes of sort of like these murals of people all around the city, which we eventually discover over the course of the film that is actually this mafia hitman. When he kills people, he spray paints these little murals for them to represent these bodies that he's taken out of New York, and now there they are on the wall standing there again. But essentially, like right away after giving us like a little bit of kind of the vibe we're looking at and, the location that we're going to be in, immediately it's like we're in an alley where we witness some sort of criminal meeting gone wrong. Dude pulls out a knife and just guts a dude and slashes his throat in the opening like minute.
Yeah.
And a very little boy sees him through the little crack in the fence.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to say I love the touch of blood splashing across the Wall Street Journal. That's a very Larry Cohen on the nose bit of symbolism, but I appreciated it. Yes.
I also like the change, I guess, for this perspective is that the boy this time is like 2 years old or something like that, and he can't talk yet. But they paint it as like he can understand what is being said to him and what he sees, but he can't express it. So it becomes almost like, or at least at first, it becomes like this. Like ticking time bomb thing. Like, is this kid gonna learn how to talk like in the next 6 months that I'm with him and the mother and gonna expose me or whatever? And I thought that was a fun perspective change in that regard.
Yeah, his first words were going to be spoken on the court stand.
Yes,
and he was going to be like, that guy.
Murderer. Yeah.
I mean, they even have some sequences with the kid later on when like for instance, the criminal is asking the kid directly when the mother's away. He's like, what should I do about this cop that's after me? And then it cuts to the kid holding a butter knife and doing a stabbing motion as if he's like, just take him out, man.
Yeah.
And there's a couple moments like that where they use the kid as like he's kind of actually interacting and knowing what's going on, but he can't talk.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting flip, the fact that we are no longer in the psychological point of view of the child who is experiencing all of this and trying to navigate his way out, but instead the child is more of you're right, he's more of a device.
You can call him a prop.
He's a prop, but he's a good prop because I mean, this kid kind of, he has to do some, he has to stay awake for a lot of this production. I give him credit. You know, he's awake on screen. And there's a couple really great moments with him. I love the bit in his apartment when the guy who is the killer and is trying to protect himself, the mafia keeps coming up to him and being like, that kid witnessed it, you need to fucking kill this kid, and like the mafia is literally like in his apartment and he has the kid with him because he's become sort of involved with the mother and the kid, which is kind of the premise of the film, that he keeps trying to get involved with them to at once try and figure out, if the kid really knows anything, if he has to kill the kid, but also, he's developing feelings for the mother and maybe he could be the kid's father. There's a whole bunch of weird melodramatic kind of complications there. But at a certain point, he has the kid in his apartment. The mafia is in his apartment, which is like as literalized as you could get this premise to be. And he tries to lock the kid in the room, and the kid totally escapes. And his first thought is, I'm going to the fridge. I'm grabbing that beer. Son. And there's so many little great little suspenseful moments where like he's having a conversation in his living room, and in the background of the frame in the kitchen, you can see the kid walking around, and you can see the dude just freaking out, being like, I got to get these killers out of here before that they see that I actually have this kid in my apartment and I'm a lot closer to this situation than I've said I am. So there's a couple interesting little suspenseful moments that are, very different than, say, The Window, where you get so much from the kid's perspective. It's more like the kid is a liability in an interesting way, both in the plot and also in a lot of the actual filmmaking suspense devices and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I was amused by how broadly drawn the mafia guys are in this. And no attempt whatsoever at sympathy. Is like the one guy goes, kids have accidents, they're always falling down, they're always getting hurt. Hey, it's like, wow, okay. So
there's
they
like
really are just like ordering a hit on the kid. Yeah.
There's several scenes where they're just like show up to the criminal and they're just like, so did you kill the fucking kid yet? They just keep doing it. There's zero sympathy whatsoever.
Yeah. I do love how much they try to be sort of implicit about it, but they just can't be. They're just like, no, we want you to murder this child. Because like early on in like that barber sequence, for example, where, you know, he's going to the crime boss and the guy is giving him a good old haircut while he's there.
That old chestnut, yes.
Yeah, and he's like, you know, I don't think that there's, you know, any reason to kill the kid. Like, you know, he can't even speak. He probably doesn't even know what he saw. And he's just like, yeah, I'm not arguing with you. But on the other hand, there's no harm in being absolutely secure, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know? And then what's the follow-up line? You killed kids during the war, didn't you?
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. There's some dark stuff in this.
Yeah. But also some of the stuff again that I appreciated a lot is, you know, every parent has had that experience that she has in that sequence leading up to the big crowd scene we were talking about, of looking away for a split second, and then you look back and your kid is gone, and holy shit. So, like, first of all, how acutely that sequence dramatizes that moment of realization and the panic, the full body panic that immediately follows, is great. And then I loved the twist that he pulls there, where you really do think this, you know, the killer we've been following through the movie has swiped the kid. And then you have this whole chase sequence. And then it turns out that it's the estranged father. Really clever bit of playing there. And bit of writing. I dug that sequence a lot. And then the way, like we said before, that it leads into this great sequence where clearly they have like 50 unpaid extras because they just started shouting at each other in an intersection in Greenwich Village. You know, I love that.
And it kind of shows how like rough around the edges this estranged dad is too, because I think one of the first things that he says, like he takes the kid without telling her, showing her anything like that. And then when she challenges him on it and follows him, he says something like, well, I just figured you'd think it was me. Like, it's like, what? Are you fucking insane? Like,
this is
we're in the middle of New York
behavior.
City. Like, I'm just going to assume, oh, I didn't see you take him, but I'll just assume that the father that I don't have any contact with just took him, and he's going to be completely okay. Like, what a loser.
Yeah, and I do love that you can tell that it's all real people in the streets who think that they are witnessing like a real kidnapping or family dispute taking place. Like the whole neighborhood starts circling like this little altercation that's taking place. They start like berating the dad and shouting at him and like pointing fingers and shit at him. Like,
yeah, dude.
And she has to say at one point, you know, I know what you're like when there's no witnesses around and the show is over. And she puts a kibosh to that whole situation. But up until then, like, you know, you were just feeling a real sense of danger, you know, because of the actual premise of the film. And you don't really lose that knowing that it's just the dad who was trying to kidnap you. Like someone was still trying to kidnap that kid in like a really busy street that everyone was there.
Yeah, no, that's
also
danger. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just say that sense of danger that you're talking about, you know, that is another thing that sort of carries over from The Window for me is, you know, you do get the scene where he's got him in the park and he is eyeing those fence spikes.
Yes.
As he's swinging him.
Crazy.
And, yeah, like that's sort of the equivalent of the sitting on the fire escape sequence in The Window for me. Like it was very tense and upsetting, and it did seem like totally possible that something bad was about to happen to that kid.
And the pacing of it is really just that much scarier because Cohen, like, he does these low angles where he's showing, like, basically the kid swinging, and he's doing it from below the kid pointing upwards. Yeah. So it really exaggerates the height that he's probably already at, and then he does things like he makes the scene go quicker as kind of the tension and nervousness ring up, and right before you think this might be the moment that he just has this kid fly into the concrete or those that spiked fence, the dad stops him, and it still results in the kid like hitting the ground and kind of hurting himself. But it is at least a slight sense of relief because you know that he's not going to get spiked on the fence. But there's still a complication to it because we know that he doesn't have the best relationship and the mom doesn't have the best relationship with the father, who's the one that stops the situation. And then in front of his son, he's just like gets his ass kicked brutally. And it's very complicated. I just felt nothing but sorry for the kid, I guess, in that
Yeah.
circumstance.
Oh,
Really,
this kid is still in therapy. I mean, like,
oh yeah,
and not even necessarily just the character. The actor, I'm sure, is also, if you're that age and you're in a Larry Cohen movie, like you're in rough shape for a while.
yeah. As folks have to remind him every day that it was just a film. I swear.
Yes.
Well, and also, like, what's really perverse about that sequence is that the excitement of the sequence is that you are in the headspace of a guy who is very seriously considering murdering a child.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
And you've seen this for 45 minutes already.
Yeah, like the way that it's edited, where you just get those as Jamie mentioned, those low angle POV shots of the swing going higher and higher, and then you get cuts back to the spikes, you get cuts back to Johnny being like, what if these two things were to meet each other and I was to do that?
And I just walk away.
Yeah, so I think that Larry Cohen really gets the suspense sequencing that he does in this really right. If I had any kind of like any sort of issue that for me was just that some of the way that it kind of tries to drag out the premise felt a little long to me.
Yeah, I agree.
That you know, because like, and part of the issue I think is that Larry Cohen, you know, he gets to it right away. You're so instantly excited in the first minute, and you're like, oh my god, what could possibly, you know, he doesn't even need the setup. We're already into the meat of this. It's crazy. But then there is like probably at least an hour of just this guy trying to woo the mom and thinking about it, and it takes basically at a certain point, I thought that the climax was going to be that the mom was going to figure it out and we were going to have like 20 or 30 minutes of the perversity of realizing she's fallen in love with like a killer and the person who has made her, but she doesn't find out until literally the last like 3 minutes. And there's a lot of time spent with Johnny, who is just, do I kill the kid? Do I not kill the kid? Do I kill the kid?
And romancing the mom, like this, you know, lest we forget,
romancing the mother.
This is a mid-'80s movie, and so there are many montages. There are montages galore. It's not quite Rocky IV level of montage overexposure.
That's hard to get to.
But there is there's several, you know, just sort of romance in the city and the aforementioned eroticism, and yes, we got there is a sense a bit of marking time there. I would agree with that. Although I will also note,
romantically crashing an anti-rape rally is a very funny part, which is another thing that Larry Cohen had to have just done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he's just like, that's cool. We'll incorporate it into the film. We'll write it in. Here, have Sally handing out flyers for a vigil against rape. Although I will say, I got to give a little bit of credit to her performance. She really made me laugh with the come on, it's against rape. Like, take the flyer. Like, aren't you against rape? Please take the anti-rape flyer.
Yeah. Although again, one, you know, you mentioned it a little earlier, but one of those montages is the walking. Walking through Times Square, being tailed by a sleazy PI who's eating a slice while synthesizer and drum machine music is playing. Like, just inject that into my veins, baby. Like, that is 80s sleaze New York cinema. That's everything I want in one sequence. Is like, yes, it's so gross and synthetic and perfect. I loved everything that was happening in that moment.
Yeah, that sequence in particular, because like the husband is the one who hires the PI to follow John because John is obviously romancing his ex-wife and he wants to know more about him, and so you get a really classic New York sort of stalking scene. It's not even a slice; it's a big old hot dog, which is even better.
Oh, is that it? Oh, Jesus!
Yes,
Lizzie.
Yeah.
I only know that because I took note and I was like, that is the most New York thing I've ever seen. This like sleazy PI stalking this man through Times Square with a hot dog in his hand. And of course, in Larry Cohen fashion, it turns into a car chase that's like partially shot handheld in the interiors.
Right.
And I was reminded a little bit of how he loves to do those like sidewalk chases. He didn't get quite that far in this. Instead, he has Johnny, lead him to like this condemned building, which is another actually thing that sort of to talk about with the window.
Yep.
But he takes him to a condemned building. And one thing I really liked about this is that there's something interesting here that Cohen, he keeps a lot of that 70s kind of grit and grime that he had, but obviously this is updated a little bit for the 80s. And there is like this really sort of like overexposed kind of sheen to it that I was curious about. Cohen doesn't always do that kind of stuff. So I was curious where it was going to kind of play in. And it played in a little bit to some of the romanticism of the actual montage and the seduction elements of it, but it worked really well in this murder sequence where he leads the PI in there and, he's right near a condemned building near the water and where he jumps out and he stabs him. And there's this incredible image of him like blurred and silhouetted against the New York skyline, dragging his body into the condemned building. And as all of that overexposure made so much sense to me when I saw that image, because it's so bright that it totally obstructs your vision.
And it's towering, right? I think is one of the buildings one of the twin towers in that shot, because it's just like I just love it. It's absolutely massive. It's just towering over everything, and that silhouette shot. I wrote that down too. I thought that was it might be the most gorgeous shot in the movie. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Also,
so there's really good sequences like that, and all throughout this, honestly.
Also, I really like the kind of the complications you feel when he initially gets the PI, because we know that this guy is trouble in some way, shape, or form. Like he's kind of getting involved with the mom, and through that maybe we'll make a better decision. But we still think that kid is in danger, and so when the father goes to the PI, you have these mixed feelings, because the reason he's doing it is because he's just like a total psychopath that doesn't trust his ex-wife and all of that. But then at the same time, you're kind of like, this is good that a PI is investigating this dude, because like he's going to kill a kid, possibly. So I did like that kind of complication of the whole matter. And also there's just kind of a weird length to that PI scene in the office, the initial PI meeting, because the PI almost starts giving him like life advice and stuff like that. And then eventually the scene just ends and he's like, anyway, if you could find something on this son of a bitch, that'd be great. I thought their relationship for that one scene was very strange, but I appreciated it.
Well, there's a lot of weird things with the father character, because there's part of it that, he's doing things that, again, are very clearly like he's trying to kidnap his own child. He doesn't have very good motivations for a lot of the things that he's doing. But then they include a scene where, he actually meets with the ex-wife and he kind of talks to her, and, she kind of agrees that he's kind of like matured and maybe he's ready for a wife now and things like that. Like there's definitely a little bit of Cohen sneaking in,
character development, God forbid.
A little bit of character development, but also like, at a certain point he wants you to really feel bad for this dad, which is hard to do after how we meet him.
Sure.
But in the end, in the final sequence, there's a part where they really, really want you to be like, trust the dad a little bit,
he's trying.
He's not the guy who's kidnapped, because they have the girl, her friend, who is very into this idea of feminist homicide. She keeps her gun around at her at her store all the time, and she just really wants an excuse to shoot a guy. And so when she's gonna shoot the father in the big climax, I was very confused at some of the feelings that Larry Cohen wanted me to feel, other than I guess sheer chaos.
That's that's the only thing I could read, because I did feel like I don't know. It was almost a little.
Her feminist friend was going to
chaotic.
Shoot her husband who tried to kidnap the kid.
And I don't think they ever go back to that either. So we don't really know if she shot him or not. They just have. I think they just end it on she's holding him at gunpoint and he's just like, I'm not the bad guy here, and then that's it. And you're kind of like, God, I really hope she didn't shoot the guy. I mean, I understand why she might think what she thinks, but we never really get that answer. I found that a little peculiar, but that moment is nuts. I also like their little the perverse line that she has when she's talking to her for the first time in the shop, and she says something like the kitchen prison that the men have put us in has plenty of sharp weapons or something like that. So she implies she wants to like stab men and shit. Yeah. She's a wild character.
No, I want to talk. Well, that actor is the great Ann Magnuson, who has done a fair amount of film work, but not a lot of big things. She starred in a John Malkovich movie called Making Mr. Right that I think Susan Seidelman directed after Desperately Seeking Susan. But Ann Magnuson was a big figure in the sort of downtown New York theater / performance art scene of the early 1980s. She was a really like kind of a superstar among that scene. And what I find interesting about Larry Cohen using her in this film as he does is that the same year as this, he made another film called Special Effects. And
I want to watch that so bad. I've heard that's great.
It's really interesting. It's like, and what's cool about it is that, like, this is him kind of doing a riff on Rear Window, sort of by way of The Window. Special Effects is kind of his Vertigo take. So he was clearly like sort of in a Hitchcock riffy mood in 1984. But that film starred Zoe Lund from Miss 45 and Eric Bogosian, who at that time was also in this same sort of downtown offbeat performance art theater scene. And I just find that interesting.
Would that have been around the time he was on stage with Talk Radio?
Yeah, not
nice.
I think it was around or maybe right before Talk Radio, because before Talk Radio, he was doing these sort of monologue shows where he would just be in these little black box theaters and he would come out and play like 6 different characters doing monologues. I love the idea of him working of that. Not only was he sort of in New York and just continuing to make his exploitation movies, but that he was still plugged into the art scene in New York, where he was finding these exciting performers in these sort of weird spaces and putting them into his exploitation movies. I think that in a weird way says a lot about the kind of filmmaker that he was trying to make those discoveries still.
Yeah, he was looking at these amazing artists and being like, hey, I got a small role about a woman who just wants to commit feminist homicide.
Yes.
Are you in?
Yes.
And she was like, yeah, all right.
Yes, I am.
All right, I'll do it.
Yeah, and knowing the kind of performance art that Ann Magnuson was doing at that time, I would not be surprised to find out that she either improvised or rewrote some of her dialogue, because that's very much in the school of the kind of stuff that she was doing.
That's cool.
Yeah. The mom has a great line at the end of that scene that I loved, where she's saying that she's going to take care of her son. She's going to make him strong and healthy boy, so that one day a woman can shoot or stab him.
It's a good bit.
There's some interesting sort of like gendered commentary kind of that Cohen's trying to fit in. I don't know how much of it like all like lands with
the rest of the film.
Like how I don't know how built it does feel a little bit like what Jason was talking about, that some of it might have been improvised dialogue that gives character rather than something that was really baked into what he was trying to get into with the main plot that's taking place. But I will say that there, despite the fact that there's maybe a little bit too much of it, there's a little bit of perversity that I did enjoy of the main character John, who is the killer, who is this mob hitman who killed this drug dealer for the mob and obviously got seen. There is something really interesting about some of the seduction sequences. Not all of them, because there's so many. They really do lean into the 80s. Like, we got to have a montage and the soundtrack going. He's like, I'm a shadow on the walls of the city, baby. And there's shots of graffiti and them walking around. But there is like there was
that
a cool element to watching it transition from like a stalking sequence of her to then him, in trying to pull off like this little meet cute, and and there was something perverse about watching him like in the first time he meets her, like holding the child that that he has to kill at some point and stuff. So like there's some elements in there that I think do work, and it does have kind of this nice little lonely New Yorker, weirder meet cute kind of vibe to it. And we know, similarly to how we knew in The Window, we know, his motivations for tracking her down, which kind of gives us a little bit of information that makes it a little bit more icky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I really like there's a one diner scene. I think it's either their first date or their second date. And she's basically just talking about the child and how, he's going to be growing up soon, or at least in the next stage of his development. And she mentions, he's like,
we won't get him to shut up.
Yeah, in no time he'll be walking and talking, and we won't be able to get him to shut up, and he'll be asking all these questions, and it's just going to be a time for us. And I just love like Johnny's face.
He's going to say all the things that he's seen in the last 1 to 2 months.
Yeah, specifically. Yeah, it's and Johnny's face in that is just so like distraught and concerned. He's like, oh my God, and also it kind of, I think, just pushes him to be motivated more to get closer to her. He is intrigued, but at the same time, it's kind of convenient for him and the job he has to do as well. So, I love those complications. I had a lot of fun with those.
I like the one where he returns to his nice apartment that he can't let her know that he has, because he's kind of pretending to be like this like wandering drifter guy. But he has this really nice apartment that he earns with his mafia money, and he has a blonde girlfriend. And there's a great scene where they talk to each other, and she says, I'm on the pill, I've taken all of this, you don't, what is this whole thing about a baby? And because he keeps talking in his sleep about the baby that he has to get rid of. Followed by, a scene of him riding bikes around New York with her and going to diners and, becoming this sort of quasi stepfather to, getting to know her little boy and possibly filling in that kind of role in his life. That stuff, it wasn't quite as pointed as this other film that I'm about to mention, but some of the perversity there did remind me a little bit of the 80s horror movie we talked about with Adam Naiman just a couple months ago, The Stepfather. Where you get a little bit of this idea of like, this guy who's trying to fill in kind of this domestic role for you might have more ominous intentions and things like that. What's strange to me though is and again, kind of my only real issue with this movie is that it doesn't get to the point where the mom is involved. Right. And the kid isn't all and the kid's not developed enough to be all there. So we never get a character in the movie who for very long knows the situation that we're in. So you don't get the stuff like with Bobby Driscoll where you're like, oh my God, he knows he's got to do something. He's got to figure something out. And I spent a lot of the movie waiting for the mother to, figure something out and or at least be suspicious. Yeah. This is the most incurious woman that's ever been written into a movie.
It takes her child being abducted on a traveling merry-go-round in order for her to realize the danger that she's been in this entire time. Yeah, and what an image! That is a crazy image. But that's like the last, I'd say, 10 minutes of the movie. She finally figures it out, and
honestly,
even then she can't.
It's not even that. Yeah.
Well, even then she can't do anything about it, and she ends up like
because she still thinks it might be the father when the kid is kidnapped, right? She doesn't figure out that it's him until literally I wrote the time down.
Oh,
it's
yeah, you're right.
4 minutes.
Yeah.
She finds out that it's him when she finds the photo at home.
Right. It's we see him go into the car, but she doesn't see him. Right. You're right.
Yeah. But you're right. That sequence is still incredibly suspenseful with just the way that it's filmed, and like they set it up earlier in the film that she takes Johnny with the kid to go to this like merry-go-round that's on like the back of a truck.
Yeah,
that this
I don't know what that's about, but that's not around
that
anymore.
Seems just so unsafe.
For the record, we're not doing the portable merry-go-rounds on the back of trucks here in New York anymore, and I'm glad because my fucking kids would want to ride on it. I swear to God.
Yeah, but it leads to an incredible. I don't know how. I'm going to trust Larry Cohen on this one, but I don't know how that they filmed that. That's so dangerous. There's no way that is supposed to be functional. Like, it's already dangerous as is.
Yes.
There's no way that even at the time it was meant to be functional with a kid on it while the vehicle was in motion. And so you get POV shots of it literally driving around the streets with the kid on it.
Yeah.
And they are terrifying because they look like that kid is in real danger.
Yeah.
And I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they had something on set that assured some kind of safety, but
well, if we know anything about Larry Cohen, he crosses every T and dots every I, so I'm sure you're right.
That's right.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so that stuff's really crazy. Again, every suspense sequence here I think is handled really, really well when it actually hits. It's well conceived in the filmmaking. It's really perverse. For me, it's just some of the gestures towards kind of like the more 80s romantic seduction stuff. If they would have built into the writing, I think a little bit more time for us to just like have the characters wrestle with how perverse that is, rather than just kind of Johnny being the point of view for the entire time. I think I could have got a little bit more out of it. But, again, some of it's still, I liked the montage where they're playing Mama, Look What the Big City's Doing to Your Little Boy. Which leads straight into like a big, sweaty, romantic sex scene that made me kind of giggle because it does that thing where briefly you can't tell them apart because it's that era where they have the same hair. It reminded me of Point Break a little bit. But yeah, very, very sweaty, very 80s sex scene taking place.
Very synthy.
And
lots of synths.
Very synthy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But yeah, then it turns into, Johnny is getting pressured by the mafia. He is realizing that the kid is on some level probably going to be a liability at some point. And he's got to do something about it. He's spent long enough with the kid to know that the kid's not a moron. He's seeing some stuff anyway. He has some expressions on his face. I do like that scene where he tells him the story of E.T. He's like, "You've seen E.T., right?" to the kid. and he's being like, how when they all told on the kids that they had E.T. and he kind of shriveled up and he looked like he was dying. That would happen to me if you told on me. Yeah. And and he's like, and unlike E.T., I don't got a planet to go home to. So he's really trying to like logic his way with this kid who can't speak.
Right. Was that the scene where he was bathing the child though? Because
he was also bathing the child.
That made me uncomfortable. That made me a little bit uncomfortable. I'm just gonna put that out there.
I also think it's pretty funny child moment where the lieutenant that keeps popping up to question the mother and kind of scold her and just be a kind of a dickhead also. He has a moment where the kid goes up to him with a butter knife and starts like doing a stabbing motion or whatever. And so that's kind of literally a moment learning. That the kid's like, yeah, exactly. He's basically taking in what he's seen and applying it. And that I thought that was just what an image to watching a 2-year-old try to stab a cop.
Yeah.
Oh man. And yeah, this thing has I think a pretty killer ending in the sense of like just the image of the last minute or so. I think is very good, and the chaos that it brings, like we were talking about.
Oh yeah, the ending is genuinely great.
Yeah,
like the last like 3 minutes of the movie, I think.
Oh yeah, it's unreal. Like we were talking about with the kind of the chaos of the homicidal feminist friend and the estranged father, but then it does this cut to the mother just very like terrified basically of who's going to come through the door, and she opens the door, has the knife prepared because she thinks she's going to need to defend herself, and just without even really thinking about it, just stabs Johnny. And it's kind of played as like this reveal where we're not quite sure, does he still have the kid? What's going on? And they just have a shot of the doorway, and Johnny just goes on his knees and lays down, and the kid is right behind him. And there's just this like there has to be this incredibly confusing moment for the mother that you never really do get to explore too much, but like she didn't really know, and now she's just stabbed Johnny. The kid is behind her and saw this violence, and now she's just kind of left with like what the hell, what happened here? Like this was because she just found out about this, so I can't imagine the confusion that she was going through.
Yeah, and then Larry Cohen rolls credits, and I do appreciate that. I do appreciate that. He's like, no need to fuck around here. Movie done.
Yep. Just holds the sun and that's it.
Yep.
Yeah, and I do love the way that he frames that, where like it's the silhouette kind of image, and when he opens the door, it's all the light from the hallway kind of like a bleeding in. And the way that it's structured is that you have her do the stab, and then he falls, and his fall physically reveals the child right behind him. And it's supposed to be the big moment where you realize, because he reached earlier, he took kidnapped the kid in the back of the merry-go-round and took him to the rundown building where he's been, killing people. And after he kills them is when he does the spray painting to acknowledge that, he's taken another soul from New York or whatever. And so, you're supposed to realize, he decided he could not go through with it. He could not kill the kid. He was bringing the kid home. But up until that point, I mean, he's been so psychotic for like 10 or 15 minutes of the movie. I didn't quite feel that gesture, but I did like it from the mother's point of view, where you get the great shot of her approaching the door with the knife behind the book and
she just saw the photos. I forgot about that.
And she just saw the photos, so she knows that he's, the one who did the killing, and she kind of has, some immediate idea of who is the one who's, got her child and everything. But yeah, the actual killing itself is really solid, especially too because it does mirror the knifing gesture that the little baby's been doing the entire movie.
Yeah.
And so now he's watched, it opens with the baby seeing a knife murder, and then it ends with the baby seeing a knife murder, but it's the mother doing it to, the movie tried to kind of gesture towards being a possible surrogate father. So that stuff I think is really effectively visualized, and, it is a great conceived, ending, and even the end actual image on the spray painted bodies of like a family to indicate that
was
he,
sad.
yeah,
Yeah, that was going to be my question, was if he had taken the kid out, would he have done like a little graffiti silhouette, or would he have done it to scale?
I think so. I think he would have. All right. I think he would have.
I mean, he's attentive, he's an artist of some kind. I'm sure he would want it to be accurate. Sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I thought when I saw that shadow family, I was pretty saddened by that. I thought that was a really impactful image. Especially because that representation has been so, just cold throughout the entire thing. It's just been him basically piling up bodies from New York.
Right.
And this was kind of a representation of what he wanted to move forward to and just couldn't. So, yeah, pretty sad.
Yeah, well, I think pivoting towards reductive rating round, I think on Perfect Strangers, this one gets like a solid to maybe even a high 3 for me. I kind of want to go back to it at some point, just because I feel like a lot of Larry Cohen's, once I kind of know what they are and I'm prepared for what he's doing, I'm a little bit more open to engaging with them. And I did think this one had like a really cool, like in terms of what Larry Cohen is delivering with, the kind of lonely weirdo New Yorker romance seduction quality with the overexposed, film and the 80s soundtrack that he's kind of pulling off and everything like that. And having all of those romantic qualities be made like more twisted by the fact of the circumstances on how these two know each other. I was surprised at how much of this movie was meant to be, kind of a quasi love story. But there were, for me, just a little bit too much absurdity in some of the characterizations, and I don't know how much I loved the main performances and chemistry between the main two, even though I could see what they were gesturing towards. It just didn't. I didn't feel that romance quality as much as I just like respected the style that they were going for. But I will say that once this got into, the stuff with the kid, and once it gets into the actual suspense sequences with the kid, and like, again, the swing set sequence and the merry-go-round sequence, and a lot of the stuff, with the amount of confusion around some of the gendered stuff between the father maybe kidnapping the child and then revealing, that, actually it's this other guy. There was a lot of stuff that was really, I think, interesting in there. I did wish that, somewhere in the like solid hour and 15 minutes, that is all the either the romantic scenes between them or the pressure from the gangsters and vice versa. I wish there was a little bit more time for there to be like a really extended climax, because the climax of this really is like kind of like 5 to 10 minutes long. And I really felt that we could have upped the perversity on the climax by getting the mother a little bit more involved, making her a little bit more curious about who she's been spending the last week of her life with. And just getting a little bit more dramatically involved in the situation, rather than just waiting for the kind of ball to drop, because making that the kind of dramatic crux of the movie that you're waiting for the mom to find out, it's like, she sees that photograph with 2 minutes before she stabs him in the chest, which is a great moment. I will say the
quick
ending
decision
is solid.
Making.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
a lot of solid sequences for sure, though. So solid 3.
Yeah, I'd give it a probably solid 3 to high 3 as well. I like with any Coen movie, I always appreciate the bizarre qualities and just the strangeness that I feel when I'm watching it. I was hoping it dove a little bit deeper into the perversity of just like him contemplating actually killing the kid, because that swing
That's
sequence
true.
is
You're kind of meant to feel sad for him really fast after the sequence where we legitimately saw him contemplate murder a child.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think that they're like that swing sequence is really good and really tense, and I think kind of shows him thinking about it, but you're not quite sure if he's actually going to do it still, and that just creates a lot of tension, and I really like that, and I thought it could have used maybe 1 or 2 more moments of that, whether it be a little more subtle or more exaggerated. I just think that would have worked well. Also, like you said, Josh, I think the mother probably could have been involved at least near the end a little bit more, just because she has to play kind of stupid the whole time, and it would have been nice for her to realize it without like 2 minutes left of the movie. But
yeah,
although
I'm
I do
just
love that
imagining
ending,
how perverse
so.
on a character level it would have been to realize, like how perverse is it that, you have been romantically involved with the person that has put like you and your child in danger, and the person who's trying to kill your child. And she literally gets 90 seconds to consider that.
Yeah, she's like, grab the knife.
Before she stabs him. And I'm like, man, where is like a scene where like she has to consider killing him for the, just for her own maternal instinct's sake.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I still think this is a really interesting story, and I also do agree that I think the two leads' chemistry, although isn't bad, I didn't quite get into it. I didn't quite believe it. But I still think that they did a really good job, and I did really like the inclusion of the estranged father. That really created a lot of cool complications, both with the gender stuff, but also I loved that scene with him where all of New York is just surrounding them as they're having this like domestic fight in public, and he's trying to steal his kid back, and like him being thrown into the mix, I think created some really interesting complications. So yeah, there's a lot to really like in this. I just think it's a bit messy here and there, and doesn't quite land everything, but still really good. So I would recommend it.
Worth checking out.
Yeah.
For you, Jason.
Medium 3, I would say, mid 3. Okay. I agree. Especially Brad, I don't know how to even pronounce the last name. Brad Ridgen, who plays Johnny, not the greatest actor. The woman who plays the mother, she is considerably better, I thought. But yeah, it drags in that second act quite a bit. There's too many 80s montages. I agree with pretty much all of the criticisms you're making, but again, from the perspective of like as a New York time capsule, hard to beat, and partially because Coen, you really are getting unfiltered with Coen. Like even something like Taxi Driver, which is, or A Midnight Cowboy or something like that, which sort of has that New York seediness, still has like at least that layer of artifice because it's like a professional Hollywood studio production or whatever. And the fact that he really is just out there like, guerrilla style grabbing shit on the streets, like a French New Wave filmmaker or something like that, really does give it that extra just sort of layer of grime that I love in the New York cinema of this period.
I love the way he shoots New York.
I was just looking it up too. Anne Carlisle, who plays Sally here, who I did think was pretty good.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, but Jason, she's in Liquid Sky.
Oh God,
I've heard that's good. I haven't seen that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she's the lead, right?
I'm
of Liquid
totally
Sky.
embarrassed that I've never made that connection. That's genuinely embarrassing that I hadn't put those two together.
That is all good.
But yeah, no, Liquid Sky is terrific, but Liquid Sky is cuckoo bananas.
Yeah,
awesome.
I've blind bought the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray
Yeah.
because I've just assumed that it's like the kind of thing that we would love on this show.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm since that came out 2 years before this, I'm gonna guess that Larry Cohen was a fan.
Absolutely. And again, that sort of speaks to him being kind of plugged into some of the weirder stuff that's happening in the city artistically. I should also mention, just because you mentioned Vinegar Syndrome, that they have a really nice Blu-ray of this title out.
Cool.
Perfect Strangers as well.
Yeah. They have that's how I watched it and revisited it for this. Was it's strange because the title card on it is Blind Alley, which I assume is just like an alternate title that was on the print that they restored or whatever. But that's what I'm guessing. It's a really good Blu-ray. It's worth picking up.
Cool.
Yeah, well, I think that will wrap it up for everything this week. That was, what were we just talking about? The Window, 1949, and Perfect Strangers, 1984.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Jason, for joining us and for bringing these films with you. If you've got anything to plug while you're here, this is where we have you do it. And I think you've got something pretty big. We've maybe mentioned it already.
There's a book. It's called Fun City Cinema, New York City and the Movies That Made It. It's available now in handsome holiday gift appropriate coffee table book form. Or also for much less expensively, it is also available in Kindle and Nook and other ebook formats. But it's a 100-year dual history of New York City and New York City movies and their various intersections, handsomely illustrated with still frames and behind-the-scenes photos and all that sort of thing. Covers 10 chapters. Each chapter covers a decade and focuses on kind of a key New York movie of that decade. It's a good book, and I'm really proud of it. And then also, amazing. I should mention that in the process of between turning in the book and it coming out, we also started a spin-off podcast, which is also called Fun City Cinema. Mike Hull is my producer and co-host on that, and we have 10 episodes total, and each one is just a little audio documentary about we pick out a couple again of key New York movies that are sort of important in the history of New York as well, and we play clips and we talk to film historians and film critics and filmmakers. Walter Hill is on an episode of the show. We got our Taxi Driver episodes.
Oh my God.
Our Taxi Driver episode where I talked to Martin Scorsese is coming up soon. A lot of good stuff in there. And again, we're telling more stories that sort of there wasn't room for in the book, or going into more detail than we were able to in that format as well. So that's the podcast. It's Fun City Cinema, and it's wherever you pick up your podcasts.
That sounds awesome.
Amazing. Yeah, go look into all of that. Buy the book, listen to the podcast, get into it, find out about New York. It's how I'm going to find out about it.
Yay.
I'm looking at the book right now. Let's see. For our listeners, in 1 week's time, we are going to be back continuing Noirvember, because this was obviously the start of it with this episode. And next week we are leaving New York and we're touching down over the pond in London, where we are going to be talking about The Long Good Friday, 1980, Bob Hoskins, John Mackenzie, and we're going to be pairing it with Mona Lisa, 1986, Bob Hoskins, director there, Neil Jordan. And so you can look forward to that episode next week. We're going to get real deep into the barrel chest and receding hairline of our favorite British gangster.
Woo.
Yes.
And The Long Good Friday. What a picture. What an ending.
Damn.
What a soundtrack.
I watched
Patreon.
I watched both of those for the first time right at the beginning of lockdown, and they just knocked my socks off. They're so fucking good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they are really fantastic. So we're probably going to do a big episode on that. Patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. That's going to be next week. And then in 2 weeks' time, we are going to be back doing another main feed guest episode where we are going to be talking about One Night in the City from 1950.
Oh, hell yes.
Which I haven't seen, but I've heard is really great.
Yeah.
And we're going to be pairing it with a classic, The Sweet Smell of Success, 1957. Somehow we haven't covered it yet.
Holy shit.
And, we're going to have a crazy Noirvember month this year. And just for the hell of it, I'll say 3 weeks from now for the last episode, it's episode 200. So we wanted an episode that people have been asking for a while. And we were kind of like, we wanted to throw in some representation from across the globe crime cinema. We're going to talk about Takeshi Kitano, and we're going to do Violent Cop and Sonatine to round out our crime month here. And look forward to all of that. It's coming in the next 2 to 3 weeks, basically.
Stoked.
Yeah. So thanks so much, as always, guys, for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.